Well, now it tells me I'm live. Golly, went through all this a while ago, and sure enough, I wasn't live. So, pardon the tardiness, you guys. Bob Lusker, the Pond Boss. Welcome to this Wednesday, and let's have a little lively discussion today. I don't know what all you guys want to talk about, but I do have a few things on my mind I want to talk about. I want to make sure that I can see comments. I can't tell if anybody's watching yet or not. Yep, we got, looks like 3 viewers, maybe. Okay, so, hello everybody. You know, you think after doing this so long, I got to figure it out, but I ain't that smart. So, you know what I thought I'd talk about tonight, till you guys start posting a few questions, is I'm here in my office. It's still a little bit bare. Won't be long now. Debbie's promised me she's got the other bookcase painted, which is going to go behind me over there somewhere. And then we can put stuff on it, hang my Pond Boss sign up, and then we'll be able to get rolling here, make it look even more better. So let's see here. I'm not seeing the comments yet. I know there's comments going on because I can tell something's happening here. Oh, here we go. Now I can see them. There's Fred Bingaman, Mike Cottrell, Blair Ulring, and Chuck Anzalone. Good to see you guys. Woo! I wasn't sure if this is working or not. It's been a little bit of a struggle tonight trying to get this figured out. So, hey, you guys know the deal. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like, share it to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. Leanne didn't make it to the office today. Her internet was down, so she had to work from home. So next week we will have a drawing for sure. I'm sure she'll watch this because she posts these up on our YouTube page after we're finished. So let's get this thing rolling. Hello, Samuel Jenkins. Good to see you, brother. Looks like we've got about 20 viewers. Got 5 comments, 3 shares. That's good. That's great. So what I thought I'd talk about tonight, start off talking about, is water. You know, for those of you guys that are regular viewers of this show, you know my 5 concepts. You guys can probably preach them with me. Number 1 is happy water. Without happy water, nothing else matters. The second one in line to that is the right kind of habitat. If you don't have the right kind of habitat for your fish or your plants or whatever you got, it ain't going to work. But it doesn't work anyway if you don't have good, happy water. Third thing is a food chain. It takes 10 pounds of food to move trophic levels. So it takes 10 pounds of plankton to grow a pound of insects, 10 pounds of insects to grow a pound of baby fish, 10 pounds of baby fish to grow a pound of bigger fish, and 10 pounds of bigger fish to grow the ultimate prizes that you're after. Largemouth bass, walleye, smallmouth bass, hybrid stripers, whatever it is. So I thought tonight I'd start off talking about water until I can see your comments and hear what it is that you want to talk about and ask about. Mike Trail, you need water. You know what? That's a big reason I wanted to talk about water tonight. So, hello, Todd Austin. Good to see you, brother. Linda, John Madsen from Illinois. Good to see John. So, here's what I wanted to tell you about water. You know, part of the nation is in a drought. Other parts have had floods. You know, there's still some record high temperatures going on around the country. And now we're headed into winter. So I got an email from a guy. I put this into Ask the Boss in this upcoming issue of magazine. So here's kind of a little primer, kind of a jump start into the November-December issue of Pond Boss magazine. The problem he had was he bought a place, has a pond. It had been stocked about 10 or 12 years ago with channel catfish, blue cat, and bluegills. And he noticed a few fish were dying. But he's only owned it a few months, so he hasn't really figured out how to play the game yet. So his email was something like this. Hey, I just found you guys. My pond has dropped about 3 feet. I think it's got about 5 feet of water in it. It covers 3/4 of an acre to an acre when it's full. And we've got big blue cats and big channel cats. And I've noticed about 10 or 15 of my catfish have died. And there's several that have got big sores on their heads. And he sent me a picture, which will be in Pond Boss in this next issue. So what he was saying, or what he was showing me, was this big open wound on top of the head of a channel catfish, a male channel catfish that had been spawning. So what I was telling him, and he noticed a few fish were dying. Then one One key comment that he made in his email was that he brought in a backhoe and dug a bunch of cattails out from around the edge of the pond while the pond was low and muddied up the water. Hey, there's my grandkids watching. I get to see Nicholas and Madeline over there south of, near Montebello, Alabama, south of Birmingham. I got to see them last week. So, hey, kids, shout out to the Luss grandkids. Howdy, y'all. So, what happened with this guy was he didn't realize how unhappy his water was, because over that span of time, 10 or 12 years, and he's been feeding his fish, and he's been feeding them very well. Girlfriend, come here. What are you doing? My dog just jumped on me. So as he feeds the fish and increases the biomass, hello, Tim Stewart, Rod Ardwang, good to see you boys and girls. Mike Fornash, good to see you. So as he feeds those fish, they're growing in weight, they consume more feed, they give off waste. So what happens is as the water volume decreases, it goes away by evaporation. And then that concentrates the nutrients and the metals and the minerals that are in that water. And when they finally get to a point that the water can't process them, and he did tell me he's got aeration, bottom diffused aeration, he's been using beneficial microbes. But even when you do that, if the biomass is producing more waste than the water can compost or the water can process, then it can't catch up, and at some point it becomes toxic for the fish, and the fish start to die. And that's what happened. And so he's got some blue cat apparently that are 10 or 12 pounds a piece, maybe even bigger, in a really small body of water. Hello, Bubba Lusk, my cousin from Mineral Wells. Good to see you, buddy. So then, to kind of compound this problem, he dug the cattails out in August, which was way, way, way too hot. So when the backhoe dug out the, hello, Michael Airy, good to see you there from from Iowa. Danny Mack, good to see you, buddy, from San Antonio. Good to see Tim Stewart from South Florida. So anyway, when he dug those cattails out, the mechanics of doing that released a bunch of mud and extra nutrients that were bound up in that soil in the cattail roots and let it move out into the water column. So you've got fish adding waste. You add some mud, and when you take suspended clay particles into the water and the fish are distressed, and then when they breathe that water, those clay particles can cling to their gills, and that can cause them breathing issues. So the bottom line was he inadvertently created the perfect storm to take out some fish. Tim Stewart's in Washington. Holy cow, you went catty-cornered all the way across the country. Hope you flew. So, he's got water quality issues. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about water quality, water chemistry, and you guys throw some questions at me or we're going to have a short night because this won't take long. We'll scroll back up here and make sure I haven't missed anything so far. Fred Bingaman from Illinois. I mean, you can see over my shoulder. You can see what's there. Hey, there's Mike Cook. Good to see Mike from North Carolina. So here's the thing about water. My son Jonathan, Bird Dog, huntbirddog.com, one of the sponsors, he called me last night and said, hey, can you send an article that we can put with our newsletter for Bird Dog? So I pulled one up. It's one of my favorites. I mean, I've written hundreds of articles, and I can never remember anything I write. When it's time to write, man, I sit down and I just fire it off. Hello, Nancy Bishop from Northwest Georgia. Good to see you, dear. So, but there's a couple of articles I've written that I actually like, and one of them that I wrote is called The Majesty of Water. So I take the readers through the magic of the majesty of water. And the more you understand how water works, the better you can figure out how to keep it happy. Happy water is a big, big deal, real important. Hello, Owen Nelson from Nebraska. Good to see you, buddy. The way you keep water happy is to move it. Now, here's what I want you to know. Water is the universal solvent. Anything that can dissolve into water will. Anything that can absorb into water will. There's differences between absorbing and dissolving. So all these different things kind of come together with water as the vehicle. Hey, Chuck Brinkman. Oh, look, Elena. You must have been working out at school or something. Haven't seen you in a while, girl, from right there out of Missouri. Good to see you. Chuck is raising those girls right. I'm here to tell you. The pictures he sends of those girls catching giant catfish and big bass in their backyard pond, pretty dang cool. So the thing about water is it can dissolve anything from metals to minerals to organic matter to nutrients. And then as it does, when it absorbs or dissolves these things, nature's not going to let some of this stuff go unused. And what I mean by that is when you get nutrients dissolved in there, something's going to grow. You know, and if you get the right temperature and the right food and sunlight penetration, something's going to grow. And when that happens, then you got to deal with it, because the water might be able to deal with it, it might not. So for example, I asked this guy what he was feeding his catfish, and he was feeding Purina's Aquamax Pond Fish 2000. Which is a grain-based fish food. And those catfish, they convert at about 2 to 1. So they eat 2 pounds of fish food, they gain a pound of weight, and then they relieve themselves of a pound of fish waste. Now that can be liquid waste in the form of ammonia. It can be a solid waste in the form of poop. I know all the kids, my grandkids just died laughing because Papa said poop. Poop! So all that stuff migrates down to the water column. And then the microbes kind of get it suspended back up into the water, and something grows because it's food. It feeds plants. You know, so in order to keep the water happy, you let it do what it does. Elena says 4th grade's taking up my fish. Hey, wait till you get 8th grade, kid. I hear you, though. I feel your fishing pain. So the best way to cleanse the water is to diminish the nutrient input and expedite water's movement to be able to process those wastes and that organic matter. And the best way to expedite it is with aeration. You know, and so the more you can move the water with aeration, especially small bodies of water like that, then the better you can expedite the breakdown and the composting of this waste so that something else can take it up and take advantage of it. So that's pretty much how that works. Now, it sounds easy, and it kind of is, but then when you've got that many fish producing that much waste, because I asked him how long it took to feed a 50-pound bag of fish food in that small pond, said it took him about 2 weeks. So he's feeding 100 pounds of fish food a month. So that's 50 pounds of fish gain. So now they're taking up more space, giving off more waste, and 50 pounds of fish waste. So when the water level is shrinking, and the nutrients are getting more concentrated, not being released, not being used, then you take the cattails out, stir up the mud. Holy cow, there you go. Now you've reached the point where your water is critical. So, you know, in these times of drought, water evaporates. And here's another real important thing to know about water is when the top about 3 feet of your pond evaporate, that's about the same volume of water as the entire rest of the pond. So if you start looking at the geometry of a pond, most of them are shaped like so. You can figure out that top 3 feet is pretty much the majority. It's at least half the volume of water that was in there. So if your ammonia levels were at 2.5 parts per million, or your nitrogen levels were at 2.5 parts per million, and the water evaporates down by half, that doubles the nitrogen amount. So something's going to use it, or it's going to get toxic to fish. So I'm getting quite a few phone calls right now from where people are having issues with water quality deteriorating. Let me see here. I see some questions coming, so let's take a pause a minute. Let me see what's going on here. Yep, so Ron Ardoin says, keep the microbes happy. Yeah, if you can keep the microbes happy. Ron and I had a great conversation yesterday about microbes, and I may dig into that here in a minute. So kind of a tedious conversation, but I might dig into that. I think you might be interested in that. Bear with me. I want to read these questions. So Nancy Bishop says, our 1.5-year-old pond flooded several weeks ago during a rare rain event. Before the rain, we were only spring-fed and knew what we had stocked. We had 1-pound bluegill and 4.5-pound channel cats. Now we just don't know. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. Now, when a pond floods, there's several things to look at. Like if you had water from a nearby stream back up on top of your pond, that's one thing. But if you had water flowing in and flowing out, that's another thing. Because when water flows into a pond and there's not backwater backing up on top of it, you get a whole different consequence from that. So I'm going to make an assumption. Matter of fact, you might tell me here. Hello, Mark Dauber. Look at there. Christopher Aguilard. That's pretty cute. So where I was going to go there is when you've got water in, water out, then typically the only fish that tend to migrate out are going to be the smaller bluegills or smaller bait fish. Now, I'm not saying you won't lose a few bluegill or you lose a few catfish, but if they've got a good home, a good habitat, and the water's been happy, they don't want to leave. They don't have a reason to leave. The water's not going to, I'll tell you this, the water's not going to force them to leave. But if you've had water back up and sit on top of it 2 or 3 feet deep, where your pond went from 1.5 acres or 1.5, however big it is, and it's spread out, over 300 acres, then you're going to have fish migrating in and out. You can't avoid that. When Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, there were ponds that had 10 feet of water on top of them. And when those ponds went back down, they still had some of their fish, but they also had carp and gar and buffalo and gizzard shad, so they had to renovate and start over. But if your pond just had water flowing in, flowing out, then you're not going to be as bad. So now we're going to start keeping catfish and bluegills. Now we don't. If you've got 4.5 pound catfish, start keeping some. And I would kick back up on feeding and see if your fish will eat, and compare the activity around the feeder or however surely you fed the fish. If you had 1 pound bluegill and 4.5 pound catfish, that suggests to me that you've been feeding. Feed a good fish food like Purina's Aquamax 600 or at least 500 or even better yet, MVP. Use that one and start throwing it out there and see what kind of activity you get. And then when you start seeing the activity, compare that to what it was before your flood. If all else fails, then you bring in a professional biologist. It's probably worth the money. I don't know how big your pond is, but it could very likely be worth the money to do an evaluation before you make any decisions. But I'll tell you this, it won't do any harm to eat some 4.5 pound catfish. Mike Cottrell, when getting so low, it's best to seine out all you can and start over when the next flood comes. Depends on what you've got, Mike. If your pond gets down to 2 feet deep and you're going to have to start over, then I'm going to tell you, yes, it's a good idea to get the fish out, clean them and eat them, and get ready to do it again. So I'm going to tell you yes in that case. In and out. Okay, Nancy, in and out, flooded for a couple hours. You're not hurt. You're not hurt at all. That didn't hurt you. It spread out. A 1/3 acre pond was 800 feet across. That did not hurt you. For 2 hours, I'll tell you this. If you lost any fish, you lost little bitty bluegills. Hand feed MVP. Keep doing that. Keep feeding the MVP. See the Groons family checking in from up around Beggs, Oklahoma. Michael Gray from over there at Nashville, Tennessee. Mark Daubers down there near Pensacola, Alabama. Hope Hull, actually. Got to hang out with Mark last week overnight when we went to Ray Scott's memorial service. I had a Ray Scott story that hit me yesterday, and let me see if I can think of it because it's pretty funny. And I can't ever remember who I tell what stories. I told you the one about the pretty girls at the beauty shop. Another one was, I'll tell you what this one was. I was at Ray's house, and Mark's not going to like this because he is a Roll Tide fan. Which, by golly, my Aggies put up a pretty good fight till they made a horrible choice at the end of the game where they had a shot at it. But you know what? Your Crimson Tide won, which we kind of expected that to happen. But I was proud of my Aggies last Saturday. So I was at Ray's house. I don't remember the year, but it was when Johnny Football was playing for the Aggies, and they were playing Alabama. And I was at Ray's house. We were watching the game, and Ray was teaching me how to drink his sheep dip scotch. Which, pretty funny story behind that. But I don't know much about scotch, still don't, but I know that every once in a while I kind of like to sip it. Well, Ray liked sheep dip. Now, he didn't drink much. He didn't drink a whole lot, but he poured 2 fingers worth for he and I during that game, and he did that 2 times. And Ray loved dogs. He had 5 weenie dogs at that time, little bitty dachshunds, and they loved him, and he loved them. And right after that game was over, I looked over, and I mean, it was so exciting to watch that game because the Aggies beat Alabama. And of course, when anybody beats Alabama, it's like the Super Bowl for that team and a ho-hum game for Alabama. You know, Clean Line Painting, checking in from Ohio. Good to see you. Hello, Mark Dyer. Yep, Reed Blackwell, I'll get your question here in a minute. So, we get to the end of the game, and I look over on the carpet, and one of Ray's dogs had deposited a little nugget on the floor. And he walked over there, and he picked up that nugget with his bare hand, walked over to the back door, opened the back door, walked out on his little patio, and pitched it out in his yard. And I was watching him do that, didn't say anything, and then he turns around, he walks back and pushes his hat back on his head a little bit, and he says, "Pond boss, I think God had one of his best days when he made dogs, don't you?" And I said, "Ray, you know what? I think you're right." Now I told that story to Mark, and Mark, he's told made that same comment to Mark Dauber, who was a very, very close friend with Ray. Lived right around the corner, neighbor, would come and hang out with Mark. Mark got some really cool video footage. We're going to kind of brainstorm and see if we can do something with it. Actually, Mark, I called a videographer friend of mine today that had a TV show for a long, long, long time and left him a message to see if he might be interested in helping figure out how to do something with the footage you've got. So I'm thinking about it. So anyway, let's see what we got. Reed says, what will that fish waste? Let me back up here. Will that fish waste be a contributor to an off-algae problem? Yes, it sure can. Because what happens is when a fish relieves itself of its waste, the gas waste coming out of its gills is in the form of carbon dioxide. The urinary waste is in the form of ammonia, and some ammonia comes out of their gills as well. And then the solid waste is a high level of potassium, a little bit of potassium, but a whole lot of phosphorus and nitrogen coming out. So it's a hot waste. So that hot waste isn't broken down, which means it's readily taken up quickly by some algae that can create an off flavor. So it can do that. And the more fish waste you have, the more profound that problem is. That's part of the reason that the catfish industry has had to figure out how to battle algae issues to mitigate and minimize the risk of having off flavors in catfish. I can remember in the 70s, 80s, and really when I was kicking into business, early 80s, that when I would buy a load of catfish to resell sometimes, you skin those fish and they smell like musty water and algae. And it's all because of the water they're swimming in, not because of so much as because of what they eat. So yes, fish waste can be a contributor to an off-algae problem. It absolutely can. So, let's see what else we got here. Y'all better throw me some questions. God, made that sound like a threat, didn't I? Elena, I've noticed the catfish are more aggressive after it rains. Can you tell me why? Holy cow. This girl's in the 4th grade and she's asking me those questions. I love that. Well, after a rain, here's what happens. There's several, and that's a great question, by the way, girl. So when a rain occurs, Greg Baird, oh my gosh, he just pulled a dad joke on us. Why are fish so smart? They swim in schools. I like that. I'll have to use that on my granddaughter. She'll roll her eyes because she's probably heard that one from me before when I was younger. Okay, so the catfish are more aggressive after it rains. There's a couple of reasons that happens. One is you get an influx of fresh water. So what happens there is when your pond sits, it becomes pretty stable. And then when it rains, that stability is decreased because you get fresh water that comes in and dilutes the bloom, brings in new nutrients, and kind of changes the dynamics and the balance of the water. So what happens then, especially when the water's moving, that triggers the catfish. So when the catfish are kind of complacent, they get fresh water, fresh food that they sense. It simulates the rise of a river, and that always stimulates fish to move and become more aggressive and eat. And then actually, when a front passes that causes a rain like that, and the barometer is dropping, the fish become more aggressive because they instinctively and innately know that something's fixing to happen, like the temperature's going to drop, so they need to eat. So they become much, much more aggressive. And it all happens right before that front passes through. It starts to peak as the front comes through and the rain falls. Then after the rain passes and things level off, the fish become a little bit more complacent. So let's see what Ron's throwing out here. Ron, Lake Area Pond Management Company, Lake Charles, Louisiana, says, we always talk about muddy or turbid water being caused by bottom fish or suspended solids, so we can use gypsum alum to attach the solids, making them heavy so they'll drop to clear up the water. But can some of these suspended solids actually be suspended organics that can be consumed by specialized suspending beneficial bacteria? Okay, so here's the short answer to that. The short answer to that is primarily no, because there's not a lot of bacteria that can stay suspended because they're not motile. They don't have ways to move around in the water, so they sink. So what these beneficial bacteria tend to do is they tend to find a place where they can cling and then reproduce exponentially. And if they've got plenty of food, hello Harrison Davis, good to see you. If they've got places they can cling like rocks or a sandy bottom or aquatic plants, they'll cling to that and they'll start to build colonies. And when they reproduce exponentially, and you guys, what that means is 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 is 8, 8 is 16, 16 is 32, 32 becomes 64, and it happens really, really fast. So they can go from very few to trillions in a real short period of time, as long as they've got two things, food and oxygen. If they run out of food or oxygen, then they're not going to be able to continue their reproduction. So in other words, what they do is they pretty well eat themselves out of a job. And then what happens with these beneficial microbes is when they migrate to the bottom, when they sink to the bottom, then they cling where they can, and they'll attach where they can and reproduce, and they'll be like little Pac-Man. They're eating whatever they can eat that's surrounding them, but they're consuming a lot of oxygen as they do that. So at the interface between the bacterial colonies, typically on the bottom, and where the water touches it, they will suck the oxygen out of that water. But they can't suck the oxygen out of the water very high. Well, they're sucking it out of the water faster than the water can regenerate it. So what that does is it mitigates their growth, levels it off, and then it kind of reaches kind of like an ecological balance as long as the water can keep funneling oxygen down to it. Well, the oxygen wants to migrate to wherever it's being introduced, which is going to be photosynthesis around plants. So bacteria do really, really well, like on American pondweed, because colonies can attach to the leaves of the pondweed, photosynthesizing, the leaves photosynthesize, creating oxygen at that interface where the bacteria are. So then as long as there's something that they can eat that's dissolved in the water column, then they'll consume it. So that's a whole lot of that right quick. Which, that's kind of the gist of the conversation we had on the phone yesterday. So hey, you know what? It's already a little after 7. Let's stop, do a little commercial. By golly, I want to tell you guys something. I've still got room for, I know, 3 more people at the Institute of Higher Pondology coming up October 26, 27, 28 down in Chapel Hill, Texas. Send me an email at info@pondboss.com, and I will get you that information really quick. because we got 3 more slots we really need to fill up. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. You guys know that drill. I also want to say a special thanks to Purina Mills. You know, I love those guys. I got to talk to one of them today for a few minutes, and one of the things I love about Purina Mills is their research and development, which they researched this fish food and have created outstanding fish foods for us. You know, that MVP, high protein, one of the things I really love about their products is they've got a variety of products. Matter of fact, they may have too many, but they've got so many products that are specialty feeds for circumstances like what we want. You know, we want to feed bluegill? There's a feed for that. You want to feed tilapia? There's a feed for that. You want to grow hybrid striped bass up to 12, 14 pounds? There's a feed for that. So that's one of the things I love about Purina Mills. And their distribution system got dealers all over the nation. So you can get that. And if you have a dealer that tells you they can't get it, you let me know, and I'll let their salesperson know, because they can get it. Now, there's some areas of the country. I know Kenny Sanderson had some issues with his dealer because the distribution system wasn't such that they could get it over there quickly enough. You know, Texas Hunter Products, love those guys. Ordered a feeder for a client yesterday. You know, and the thing about it is when I call them or send them an email, order a feeder, it's out that day. You know, if I get it to them before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that feeder's out and it's gone. You know, customer service is great. Products are great. I love Texas Hunter feeder products. And they've got some pretty dadgum cool hunting products as well. Just go to TexasHunterProducts.com and check that out. See what you see there. Easy Docks of Texas, David Schneiderman. He's been a supporter of this Pond Boss Magazine thing for a long, long time, and I appreciate him as well. So let's see, Harrison Davis. Hello, Troy Todd. Can you touch on the differences between Copper Nose and the normal strain of bluegill? Heck yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you exactly about that. A very cheap Cabernet. Woo! I could have done better. So, if it comes in a box, it might be good. But it might not be. Yeah, here's the difference. Copper Nose Bluegills are beautiful, beautiful fish. Good gosh. When you get some pure strain ones, their tails and the fins are just this brilliant copper color. And then they've got a band going across their nose that's kind of a lavender, almost purple band on each side. And in the middle of that band is a little golden tint to the nose of that fish. That's why they call them Copper Nose. Now, Copper Nose Bluegill are native to Florida, Georgia, and parts of Alabama. That's the territory where they're native. Now, they've been introduced in other areas of the South, like all through most of Alabama, through even into some of Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas. They thrive in this climate. So where I am in Texas, they do really, really well. They don't like cold weather. So they can't thrive in ponds like Michael Airy in Iowa should never stock Copper Nose Bluegill over there because they just would not thrive. And very likely, with the right circumstance, and the odds are high that they would die during winter at some point. So they're native to the southeast, transplanted through the south and parts of the southwest. They can get to be, I've seen Copper Nose Bluegill knocking on the door of 3.5 pounds. 3 pounds, 5 ounces is the biggest one I've held in my hands, which is huge. So I'm going to tell you, Copper Nose Bluegill can get beyond 2 pounds. Hello, Dave Davidson, fantastic friend of mine from Fort Worth, Texas, Hurst, Texas, specifically. So the others, when you say normal strain of bluegill, what's interesting there, Harrison, is there are strains of bluegill scattered around the nation. So the bluegill that you might find in Iowa will be a different strain than you find in the Mississippi Delta, which will be different than the ones that you find in southeastern North Carolina or up in the western part of Oklahoma. So what goes on is all these different strains of fish have developed over a long, long period of time in their natural grounds, in their native grounds. And those fish can get pretty big too. So I have held 2+ pound bluegills that are native strains of bluegills, and I've seen them in Nebraska. I've seen them in Texas. Now here's where it kind of got convoluted. There's several fish hatcheries around the country, private fish hatcheries, that have been producing bluegill that have now transplanted their strains of bluegill throughout the nation. Now, there's places where bluegill are even illegal, like Maine and Vermont. Come here, girlfriend. What are you doing? Come here. Come here. All right. So here's girlfriend. For those of you that don't know girlfriend, here she is right here. Ooh, she give me kisses. Girlfriend, say hi. Look, there you are. See, look. Okay, I'll take you outside in a minute. We're going to talk for a little bit. So, she loves me, and I love her. She's a pretty good dog. So, let's see, I don't want to lose track where I am now. So, where I'm going is I have seen areas where bluegill can't live and shouldn't live, especially in the northern tier. Now, I've seen pretty good-sized bluegill in upstate New York, for example. The problem there is it's not that their bluegill can't get big, it's just they typically don't have the opportunity because they don't have a long enough growing season up there. And when the bluegill spawn, like in upstate New York, even over into Minnesota and areas like that, if they don't have perfect environmental conditions, they're going to spawn one time a year, and that's typically in July, so they have like a 75 or 80 day growing season. Their lifespan can range there from 6 to 10 years. And whereas Copper Nose Bluegill lifespans typically like 6 years because they outgrow themselves really, really fast in the warmer weather. So those are truly a warm water fish. So there's kind of the difference between all that. So let's see here. Let me see what else we got here. Danny Mack. Let's see what Danny Mack's got here from San Antonio. I stocked a bunch of young hybrid stripers in one of my creek pools, which has breeding bluegills and gobs of young. And running the pump creek, I found that many stripers had gone over the falls eventually to feed the pond. I had similar experience last year with tilapia. That's because you've got a recirculating system, and when that water flows at the rate you have it flowing, if they don't like that habitat, they're going to go find something they like better. And hybrid stripers like open water with some depth to it. So, and I don't doubt that at all. Let's see here. Let's see what Ron's got to say here. A lot of the bacteria companies are selling beneficial bacteria for muck removal paired with a water clarifier. Oop, it jumped on me. It was explained to me that the water clarifiers are also beneficial bacteria. I've tried the muck away and it works. I haven't tried, holy cow, I'm losing it here. I haven't tried any water clarifiers, don't know if I need to. After our talk last night, it doesn't seem clarifiers are bacteria. You say they're not. I'm going to go with that, Sir Palmas. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Water clarifiers are typically enzymes. And unless there's products I don't know about and I don't understand the chemistry, and I'm going to leave that qualifying statement there because I don't know everything about everything, but I know something about a lot of things. That sounded a little cocky. I didn't mean it. Cheers. So, most of the clarifiers that I've worked with have been something that's mineral-based or enzyme-based that attacks whatever is suspended in the water. Now, if organic matter is suspended in the water, that's typically plankton. And I've seen diatoms. It's not unusual for diatoms, diatomaceous earth, which is skeletal remains of diatoms. They're so minute and so small that they're lighter than water. So they can stay suspended in the water because they weigh less than water molecules do. But clarifiers, in order to make those go out, something's got to cling to that. And bacteria typically aren't that. Now, I may be mistaken. I don't think I am. Because bacteria really need a substrate in order to break down organic matter, and that's what they're designed to do. So let's see here. Monty Waddell. Hi, Bob, from Western Illinois. I've been feeding bluegill all summer with Purine MVP 500. Plenty of activity. when I feed twice a day. 10 days ago, the activity stopped. Throw the feed out, maybe a dozen fish eat of the feed. It flows to the middle of the pond where there's more feeding activity. I pump around 30,000 gallons of water in the pond weekly from a creek. 3/4 acre pond, 15 feet deep. Water temperature at the surface, low 60s. See lots of small fish along the banks. Sorry for the length of question. Due to all this, what's your ideas? Thank you. I love your podcast. Hey, I love doing these podcasts. Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you. As the water temperature begins to drop and it gets down below 60, then their metabolic systems begin to slow way down. So now that the water, the peak operating temperature for bluegill starts around 55 to 58, something like that, and goes up into the 80s. So their prime operating temperature is 70 to 80 degrees. And they'll feed like crazy in that temperature. Then when the temperature begins to fall, they start to slow down. So, let's see. Part of the reason the activity could have stopped would have been post-front. So if you had a front blow through, they'll stop feeding for a few days and then they'll kick back in. So I would keep feeding them until the water gets down in the 50s. Now I would cut back the feed. Cut it back a little bit. Mark Dyer's asking me, how big is Bruce's largest bluegill? Bruce won't tell me because he won't weigh them. But I'm going to tell you that Bruce Candello probably has some bluegills that, if they're not knocking on the door of 2 pounds, they're pretty darn close. I don't know that he's got any over 2 pounds because he doesn't want to get into that. Bruce is really interesting because a lot of what he does just to figure out how to do it, and he's really not looking for any publicity or any pats on the back or any of that. But he does grow some huge fish, but he works pretty hard at it. He works at keeping the water clean, keeps the water moving. He moves it in more than one way. I'm going to tell you what that guy does. He moves water laterally, horizontally, and vertically. So he's got these, diffused systems. He's got circulators that can move the water either diagonally or horizontally. Then he's got this fountain type aerator that's violent. When I say violent, it moves a lot of water fast and creates some big currents. So he does everything he can to keep his water happy. Plus, he's in a climate where he can see zooplankton develop in big numbers. So, and the timing with that's really good too, because that's when his young fish are coming off the nest, so they have plenty of food at the right time. So one of the things Bruce does is he manages his water to be happy, but he also manages his water to grow the maximum amount of plankton that he can when he can. And he tries to do that, and he does it strategically as much as the lake will let him. Big quotation marks on that, when the lake will let him, in order to get survival rates of his young fish and bigger insects higher. So that's part of what he does. And then he culls. He culls a lot of fish. So his biggest bluegill, I'm going to tell you, I've seen pictures of his bluegill, and the biggest ones I've held are not quite 2 pounds, but I bet they're a pound 12, pound 14 ounces. He's got some huge crappie, huge bass, huge smallmouth bass, but his bluegills are probably not quite 2 pounds. But he won't weigh them. He just won't do it. And I've never asked him why. Let's see here. Tim Dill, I'm planning to add an aerator to my pond, 6 acre feet. Well, 6 surface acres or 6 acre feet. So, is it any use to do so before next spring? No, don't do it till next spring. Don't use it over the winter. It doesn't do anything for you. Matter of fact, it could make things worse. If you haven't aerated and you've got a lot of organic buildup in the bottom and you kick that aeration system on now, then it's not going to be able to cleanse itself quickly enough to keep from causing some issues. I would wait till the spring. Daddy Mac, my biggest bluegiller, 5 years old. Yep, 6 to 8 years is pretty typical. Pretty typical. Bruce is a mad scientist. You know, he really is. He doesn't stay mad all the time, but he stays scientist all the time. Okay, let's see. From the Groons family, does anyone on the resource guide do solar circulation pumps versus a fountain or an aerator? Solar circulation pumps. You know what? I don't know. I would sure look. If they don't, I wouldn't be surprised if they're working on it. Check with Casco and check with Outdoor Water Solutions and see. You know, send them a friendly email and ask them. Because if anybody's working on that, they are. I think the issue is when it comes to those circulating pumps, it costs more to move water than it does to move air. So I don't understand the physics of electricity enough or the engineering of electricity enough to understand why they do or why they don't. So now what I have seen, I'll tell you what I have seen. There's a product called SolarBee that is a solar power. You know what? I almost forgot about them. Look up SolarBee, SolarBee. They don't have a real high profile, although they've been around, I bet you 20 years. But they have a device that looks almost like a Sputnik space capsule, a flat one sitting out on top of the water. And when the sun shines, and actually I don't remember if those have a battery in them or not. But when the sun is shining, they got 4 solar panels, and it turns a fan that pulls water from down low, and you can actually, there's a tube attached to it that you can set at the level that you want to suck water from, and it pulls water up this flexible hose, brings it up, and then it cascades over the sides of the SolarBee. It's got a, you guys can look it up online and just go to SolarBee and you'll see. Those are solar powered. So let's see. Alan Williamson, I live in South Alabama. Should I run my aeration system during the winter? If not, when should I turn it off and when should I turn it back on? All right, here's the way I'm going to answer that. Unless you have circumstances where you're convinced you need to run it in the wintertime, turn it off. Because here's the purpose of an aeration system. Its job is to move water vertically to allow water to contact the sunlight and air to be able to cleanse itself. Between the energy of the sun and contacting the atmosphere, that's how water can cleanse itself the best. So once the water temperature hits about 55 degrees, that's really the magic number for a lot of things. Once the water temperature hits 55 degrees, its affinity for oxygen is now high. The odds of it cleansing itself drop. There's not much reason to keep that water moving because you're not getting much benefit from it. So what I tell folks is that when the water temperature hits about 55 degrees, it's okay to turn it off. And the next spring, as the water temperature gets above 55 degrees, up 55 to 60, that's when you kick it back on. But kick it back on using the startup process that the manufacturer tells you. Now here's what that usually is. When you get ready to kick it back on in the spring, turn it on the first day for about 15 minutes. And if you need to put it on a timer, put it on a timer. But you can turn it on for 15 minutes, then the next day turn it on for 30, the next day for an hour, the next day for 2 hours, until you build it up to go 24/7. And then South Alabama, when your water temperature the thing about an aeration system is it makes the temperature autonomous from top to bottom. So be checking your temperature. If you're real serious into this pond management thing, check your temperature. And what you'll find is there'll come a span of time where the water temperature gets above 83 degrees. That's too hot. You don't want it above 83 degrees. That's the magic number. Once water gets to be 85, 86, 87, that's stressful enough on your largest, oldest predator fish that it can actually kill them. And the analogy I use is let's strap a 50-pound backpack on our back and let's go across the Sahara Desert and let's see how far we get. I ain't getting very far. Now, some of you younger people might, but I won't. You know, and it's the same way with that. Is Euglena, Harrison going to throw something highly technical at me. Is Euglena algae beneficial or harmful to a pond, and is it considered to be plankton? No, it's considered to be algae, but Euglena, if you guys want to look this up, it's pretty interesting. It's not harmful. It's beneficial. It does no harm. It's not a it's not a harmful algae bloom like blue-green algae is, but what Euglena does is it changes color. I've watched it go from a bright green in the morning to almost a rust color in the afternoon. But the good thing about it is it cycles in and out pretty fast. So Euglena, when I see that and I can figure out that's what it is, which isn't that easy, the primary way is to watch it change color. I don't consider that problematic. I don't consider that problematic nearly like I would consider blue-green algae is problematic. So, here we go. Ooh, I'm yawning. I don't know why. It's only like I woke up yesterday at 5 o'clock in the morning, spent 2 hours working on reports, and then I drove 3 hours, 3.5 hours, had a 3-hour meeting, drove 3.5 hours back, and finished the reports, and then conked out at 9 o'clock. So, who knows? So, you know what? I guess it's about time to wrap it up. If anybody pitches one more question, then before I finish this close, I'll answer it. So, I'm going to scroll back through and make sure I haven't missed anything, because sometimes I miss stuff. Yep, I think I got them. Sometimes I miss things. Nope, I think I got them. Okay, everybody, listen, I really appreciate you guys watching this show. You're the reason that makes me keep going and doing it. If it weren't for you watching this and people paying attention to it, I wouldn't do it, I promise. So, but I also think it's my calling. It's my calling to take what I've learned up here and put it out there. Because if it doesn't, where are the wall decorations? Right here. There's some of them right there, and there's some of them right over there. So, my wife has promised me, you came in a little late and I told everybody, but my wife has promised me that by Friday she's gonna have this bookcase that isn't over here finished. Let me see, I need to see the picture. Yep. There they are. There's the wall decorations right there. There's the Pond Boss sign right there. There's the wall all that stuff is gonna go on. Let's see, what's that? Oh. There's my nil guy that I shot a few years ago. So there's a little fast-paced tour of the Pond Boss office. So, hey, I really do appreciate you guys checking in, watching this show, and I'm not sure where I'm going to be next Wednesday, but I know I'm going to be on the road. So I will figure that out, and once I figure that out, I will come at you guys live. So, once again, thanks for watching, and until next Wednesday night, adios.